Okay, well, welcome everyone to the third episode, we would say, of Off the Wall Wisdom and Whimsy. Still, still remembering. I just want to make sure we get this in so I don't forget. This episode is brought to you by Best Choice Peanut Butter, and it's not just any peanut butter. It is crunchy peanut butter. So that's good. Again, we are open for sponsorships. So far, no takers, which is disappointing, surprising. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're missing out on the opportunity to get in on the ground floor.
On the ground floor of
something big.
I mean, it's like a rocket where the countdown has started, and so make your choice.
Yeah. You can either be in the control room, or you can just get out of the way. Most of you choosing to get out of the way. I think that's a mistake.
I agree, Dave. This apparently needs to be eaten by May 3rd of this year. So
okay.
I thought peanut butter
spoons and
lasted forever, but apparently not. So anyway, we're glad to be back with you. I'll make sure I keep this in the frame. There we go. We're glad to be back with you. We've got a good, big question tonight.
It really is.
I mean, it's one of the potentially most challenging questions Christians can face.
Some apologetics would say it's the biggest challenge.
I would say it's the biggest, and so we've decided to take it on
episode 3
for some reason. But we'll give you our limited ideas on it, and obviously stick with the Bible. And so again, keep the questions coming. Glad to have it. I forgot to start the timer, Dave. I got to do that. Let me get it here real quick. We just got to sing some songs with the church. Well, with the church. We're not together, but it was still with the church.
With the church, just with the church at a distance.
Yeah, so that's good. Appreciate that. So, okay, so typical thing tonight. We'll have, we've got a couple of, well, they're definitely off the wall questions in every sense of the word.
Yes.
To start off with, animal related. We've got our big kind of question of the day that will take up most of our time. We have Dave's just tackling one question today.
One nerdy question.
Nerdy question.
But it also involves sports.
But it does involve sports.
So I figured try and rope some of you into learning about science.
By sports.
By sporting.
Dave's going to sports tonight. So, and then I've got 4 or 5. Man, I think I put, there's 5 dad jokes. And so we've got all of our questions, again, unnecessarily on the wall so that we can take them off the wall. So shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Okay. First question off the wall is, did unicorns exist at one time and just not make it on the ark? So did unicorns exist at one time and they just didn't make it on the ark?
Right.
Thoughts, Dave?
My initial thought, and I have very, very bad reasoning for this thought, so just go ahead and throw that out there, is yes. And the only reason I say that is because there used to be a Bible up in the youth room.
I was going to bring that up if you did.
Yeah, okay. It was my favorite, but I think it was NIV. It might have been
I don't remember
King
that.
James, but it was thick. It was a big one, but it had pictures in it.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, like in the maybe in 2 spots it had pictures of some of the more famous Bible stories, and one of them was Noah's Ark, and it showed the big wooden ark over there, and it showed Noah standing off kind of superiorly, directing all these animals 2 by 2 and off in the distance. If you looked really close,
it was almost like a Where's Waldo.
It almost was like a Where's Waldo.
Very small.
Very small.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a horse-shaped creature, very clearly with a single horn coming out of its head.
Yes.
And so for that, I'd say, it's kind of one of those deals we read all the time about God's judgment on human beings. So this was God's judgment on unicorns was, hey, if you don't want to listen to Noah when I told you to, then fine. You're just going to...
All right.
With the rest of them.
Well, there you
go. Do you have any strong feelings on it?
No, I mean, it was a bit difficult, honestly, and I don't remember which youth were in there at the time. It was a bit difficult, and apparently I failed with Dave to convince him that wasn't actually biblical. Like that the picture that they had put in the Bible wasn't like inspired by the Lord, but apparently Dave thinks maybe it is. So
I think, there's just got to be some reason why that Bible exists.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Okay, Second question. They both happen to be animal related tonight. What is the coolest animal in the Bible? The coolest, the hippest, the happeningest, the raddest animal in the Bible.
Gotcha. So
let's go through some contenders first.
Sure.
Can we do that?
I have two that, and I'm not sure if I can narrow it down between the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
I have two as well. We haven't talked about this.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see if they're the same two or not. So go ahead. What you got? Some contenders.
Right. Okay. So there's all sorts of different types of birds and everything that are mentioned that we don't see. Really, there's some snakes, some vipers.
Back to the birds. There's ravens feeding prophets. bringing them food.
Oh yeah. So I hate crows, but if one of them brought me like my food every day, I'd be a lot less down on crows.
Yeah, for sure. Like just little bits of a donut.
Right. Talking donkey.
Yeah, Balaam's.
I think it's Balaam.
I think it's Balaam's donkey. Strong contender.
Yes.
What else we got?
So in Genesis and in Job, we have the Leviathan.
Yes.
Yeah, some sort of sea creature, which we're not sure about, but it's inspired a lot of stories and everything. And also in Job, we have a giant creature called the Behemoth.
Behemoth. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
That is a fantastic name.
It's a great name.
Just Behemoth.
I'm trying to think. You can tell us of the other animals that we've missed. Oh, there's the golly, I always get it confused. I should know this if it's Elisha or Elijah who called the bear out of the woods.
I believe it was Elisha.
That's what I thought too, but we're not standing on that. But
murderous she-bears.
Yeah, the Elisha, the kids are making fun of him, calling him bald, making fun of him being bald, and he calls a she-bear out of the woods. And she kills, it's like 30 some kids. So there's
So don't mock prophets.
No, right. There's a bear for you. So okay, so you said two contenders?
Yes, two contenders.
Okay.
In my my list. I was just checking real quick to see if maybe there's something else that we had thought of that we just neglected.
It's all that I can remember.
Yeah.
It's all that's coming to mind.
Murderous she-bears. Yeah, okay.
We're not even thinking.
We're really not even scratching, right?
The like some of the prophetic animals that they talk about,
Revelation.
Revelation. Oh my goodness, I didn't even think about those. Shoo, that would be hard to beat some of those. I think.
Well, and some of them, of course, since they're prophetic, we don't know if they're like some sort of literal animal or if it's just that's the best way John could describe them.
What he was seeing.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's still cool to read some of that though. So. Well,
okay.
My two. Okay, my two were the talking donkey and the behemoth.
Oh, I thought we had the same. Okay, so you're going with the talking donkey.
Yes.
I am with you on that.
Yes.
How could you beat
the she-bear?
A talking donkey.
Yeah.
And how could you beat the she-bear? It's a violent story. I get that. So I'm not sure what that says about me. That makes my talk too.
I think the reason that I went with behemoth over she-bear is because we still got she-bears.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
But behemoth is something like some reputable biblical scholars have hypothesized that this is some sort of dinosaur. That's mentioned in Job, which kind of does the whole humans and dinosaurs at one point in time they did. There's the potential that they did coexist, or even if it's not a dinosaur, it's something that maybe we don't see anymore.
In that
something that's
realm.
Maybe extinct, which is kind of cool. We've got
huge and
right. It's huge, and it says something about who created the behemoth and made it to eat grass. So it was a herbivore. But just the behemoth. That's it. Even back in early Genesis, they're calling animals by name. But in Job, the only thing we know it as is it's behemoth.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is kind of cool.
I thought the donkey we might be the same. I kind of thought the she-bear. I felt like you were a murderous she-bear kind of a guy. Okay, so let's get on. So this is our serious question. Is it? Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. That one's not serious. This is a very big question, and so we joke around a lot. But this is a question that is worth pondering. It's worth thinking. It's one that your non-Christian friends may very likely and possibly ask you something along these lines. And so it's good. Listen, there's lots of times that questions come up. Perfectly fine. It's always fine to say, I don't know.
Yes.
And I'll look into it. I'll get back to you. It's always a fine answer, so don't be afraid of hard questions. But I think it is really, really good for some of these to have some answers ready and to say, hey, I don't know everything about this, but here's some things that I've thought of. And I think it's good for people to know that we as Christians, we do use our brains. We actually think through things. We're actually rational people. It's just not that we need this superstition to rely on. But so anyway, that's a long intro to a good question. The question is, and we rephrased it a little bit, but the general question was, how can an all-powerful, all-knowing, and loving God allow suffering? How can this God that we say he knows everything, he's powerful enough to do anything he wants, we believe he's loving, and yet we look around the world and we see some terrible, terrible suffering. And you see it every day. If you watch the news, you'll be depressed, but you'll see some terrible suffering. And so that's the question. How can an all-powerful, all-knowing, and loving God allow suffering? So I'm going to let you start running with the ball.
Okay.
Another sports reference. And then we'll kind of take off.
Okay. So I guess I'd kind of like to just start by, cautioning would be the right word. Okay. That when we approach the question of suffering, and you'll find that a lot of well-known biblical scholars, they call it the toughest question that Christians have to answer. So there's kind of two different ways that someone will throw suffering in your face. Two responses, I guess, that the non-believer, or even sometimes the believer, may use suffering against us as Christians. And one is going to be emotional, and the other one's going to be more logical. Okay? Dealing with emotions is not my strong suit.
That's not your
all. It's
not your
my
forte.
Cup of tea. Yeah, yeah. I know that's going to surprise some of you. I know.
Your mom will be shocked. If
she will be so shocked.
She may be the only one who watches this. I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe she doesn't even.
I don't know. I think Brad Hall has been watching. He's
good.
So
good.
We'll see if he watches this one though. So. But I think that...
okay, sorry, I got off track. So
no,
it was emotional. There's
or
an emotional
logical,
reason
right.
that they may be asking the question, or they're just thinking
logical,
through it logically.
philosophical, right?
Yes,
type response. And so, what I generally encourage people, when I'm telling someone how to respond to the question of suffering, I usually just go to Romans chapter 12, verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Sometimes, and that's if someone's coming to you with the whole question of suffering, the whole question of, why me, or how could God do this or allow this to happen, and it's from an emotional place, like they've experienced some sort of loss.
Recently experienced suffering, yeah.
I mean, trying to answer that question from some sort of a logical or philosophical place is, A, it's kind of cruel, if I'm being honest, and B, it's just going to be ineffective. Just mourn with them, just take the time to,
like it says right there,
right? Weep with those who weep. Just take the time to recognize the hurt and let them mourn. We're never, you're never going to be in trouble for just allowing someone to show their emotions.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, and it's an unfortunate opportunity as well. I've preached a number of funerals and talked with families, and it's obviously a difficult and hard thing to go through. And sometimes when our friends or someone we know, they experience something like that, a death, sometimes we want to avoid them and we want to stay away from them because we would say, I don't know what to say to them. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to approach them. I don't know what to say. And so this just reminds me that we do what the Bible says, right? We just mourn with them. You're not going to have the perfect words in that moment. If it's coming from an emotional place, such as like a funeral. You're not going to have the perfect words. You're not going to have something that you're going to say that's just going to automatically fix that right then.
Right.
They just need to know that you love them. They need to know that you're there weeping with them, mourning with them. And so I totally agree with that. If someone's coming from a place of personal suffering in that moment, probably not the time to say, I've got a book about this. Let's go through it chapter by chapter, and I'll tell you logically why you don't need to be so emotional about this right now. It's not the time. So I agree with that. So, yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, there's kind of just a simple gospel type response that you give pretty regularly to suffering, is that it's obviously not because he doesn't care.
And that's so I've said this a number of times with the youth. I've said it downstairs, but I think it's worth repeating. It, I think, helped me personally in thinking through this question in the past. People will oftentimes say, well, there's this suffering, and you say God is all powerful, and you say he's all loving. And so if those two are true, then why doesn't he do something about it? And they go to the place of saying, well, I just think maybe he's not loving and he really doesn't care. He's just up there watching this happen, and he's just got his popcorn, and he just really doesn't care. And I just try to tell people, I just don't think that that's reasonable or rational with what we believe from the Bible. We believe from the Bible that Christ actually suffered for us, right? And my favorite, I mean, I love it. I'm going to read it again because I have the opportunity. Isaiah 53, I'll read just part of it. It's prophesying about Jesus to come. And it says, he was despised and rejected by men. Sometimes we feel that, despised or rejected by men. A man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. We're acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. So smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. And you skip down a little bit later in the chapter, in verse 10, yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief when his soul makes an offering for guilt. And so my response is, I don't have the perfect answer for why they're suffering or why it would be allowed. But I don't believe it's because God doesn't care. Because if he didn't care, he wouldn't do what we just read about, right? I mean, the will of the Lord to crush Jesus. Jesus wouldn't have come to earth. He wouldn't have experienced what he experienced and suffered what, and this is a bigger topic than we can get into, what I think is probably more suffering beyond even just the physical part. Jesus suffered more than I think we ever have or ever will. And so to me, that dispels the idea that, oh, he just doesn't care. If you don't care about someone, you're not willing to suffer for that person, right, especially to the extent that Jesus did. And so do I feel like I have a perfect answer for suffering? No. But I do think it can't be because he doesn't care.
Right. And I think, if you're looking for a perfect answer of suffering, you're just going to have to pray to God about it, because we're not going to give it to you.
Well, we've still got like 15 minutes, so
maybe we can solve it. Yeah, maybe
we'll
we
see.
can solve
maybe,
it. We can crack the code on this one. So I kind of, I have a few verses and some points, and of course, as always, books to read out of, because I'm like that. One thing that Jesus tells us in the Gospel of John, in this world you will have trouble and suffering, but take courage, I have conquered the world. So it's worth remembering that life here on this world, where there is suffering and pain, we're assured that we're going to have suffering, but it's temporary, right? This world is not permanent for anybody, regardless of your religious beliefs. This is not the end. This isn't it.
Yeah.
And Jesus tells us that this world brings you trouble. This world brings you suffering. This world brings you pain. But I have conquered the world. And he did that so that then in eternity, we get to experience the absence of suffering with him in his presence.
Yeah. Can I add a verse in
along
with that? So it reminds me of Romans 8:18. says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time," this time that Dave's talking about, is very short in reality when you think of eternity. But I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. I'm not discounting the suffering that people feel now and that we go through now. But I think 10,000 years from now, when we're in heaven, it won't even look like anything.
Right.
Like it says, you can't even compare that suffering, as painful as it was here, to the glory that's to be revealed to us. And so that's a hard sell for someone who's right in the middle of it. Like we said earlier, I get that, but there may come a time later on, if you're in a relationship with that person, when you can start to do some of these things that we're doing now and take them to the Word and say, hey, remember Romans 8:18, remember Romans 5.
And, there's a couple kind of different answers for the why does suffering happen question. And, the most basic answer is Genesis, right? We're in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world. And most atheists would be like, okay, so I get that, that sin entered into the world, but why doesn't God just do away with that? Well, because he didn't want robots, right? He wanted us to be able to have free will to choose to love him. Okay? And it is impossible to have both free will and no evil, because we as humans choose what feels good, which oftentimes is going to be one form of evil or another. I mean,
and his greatest commandment is love, right? And so we know this is the ideal. To love and love genuinely is the ideal. If we loved and loved God genuinely, and loved the people in our lives genuinely, we wouldn't be sinning. Like if we could do that perfectly,
right?
Which we don't. But that's the ideal. That's what he's going after. And so I totally agree that you can't get a genuine love, without a genuine choice to not love.
And so this goes along with the whole, the atheist tries to throw out those weird questions about, could God make a rock so heavy that he couldn't, lift it? Well, yes, God could make a rock so heavy it couldn't be lifted, but he's also always going to be able to lift it. It's kind of one of those deals where, God still obeys the laws of logic because he invented the laws of logic, right?
That's where it came from.
So, right, he can't, despite being all powerful, he can't create a square circle, that would be logically impossible. He can't create a rock so big that he can't lift it. He can't create a married bachelor.
Right.
And he can't create human beings to have free will to love him and eliminate all evil, on this earth. And it's just kind of so, why does suffering exist when God is all loving? Because of us, because we often choose not to focus on loving God. Another reason why sometimes suffering exists, and I'll read out of Romans, but we're really hitting Romans hard today.
Because the Romans is awesome.
It's true, because Romans is... Well, I guess we were hitting Romans hard last week, too, Romans 4. I hope you guys read Romans 4. But
their homework, right?
Their homework, yes. So Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. And not only that, but we also boast in our suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Hope does not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that's been given to us. So, suffering produces good sometimes. The example, kind of the easy example to give, is the dentist.
Yes.
Probably, if you have kids, they probably don't enjoy going to the dentist. I know when I was a kid, I didn't enjoy going to the dentist. I still don't enjoy going to the dentist. No. But you know what? My parents took me when I was little. It's not because they hated me. It was because they loved me and they didn't want my teeth to rot and fall out. Because if it was up to me, I would eat nothing but candy and not brush my teeth, because those are, that's just that's just a fantastic way to live. But then I would be talking to you a little bit more like this, because I wouldn't have any teeth left. And I still go to the dentist now, again, not because I'm a masochist and I just enjoy causing myself pain, but because I know that it's good for me.
Yeah.
It's good for me to endure that pain for a brief period of time. And God can do the same thing sometimes. I forget the verse off the top of my head, but he tells us that all things work together for the good of those who love him.
I think it's back in Romans, Dave.
I think it's okay.
8:28, I think.
8:28, that sounds right. Yeah. So all things still work together for the good. That means our suffering can be used for good, for God.
Yeah.
And
some of you, I was going to say some of you who are listening, but I don't know if anybody's going to listen. But, but some people will tell you there are lessons that they learned through suffering that they don't feel like they could have learned any other way. Could they have? Maybe, I don't know. But they would at least tell you themselves, who have suffered greatly, I don't think I could have learned certain lessons any other way other than through suffering.
Two spring to mind just off the top of my head. Valerie Killingsworth and Michael Boyles.
Mm-hmm.
Both of whom, within the past year, not quite a year yet on Valerie, but within the past year, both of whom passed away from cancer, and both of whom have said, that they've experienced, it's not the way they would have chosen to experience it, but they've experienced blessings through that suffering. Mike in particular, he gave a whole talk on suffering here at Eudora, and I'll probably post a link in the description to that. It's just audio, so you won't be able to see him, but it's just audio. But he talks about how there's just no way that his relationship with God would have been the same if he hadn't, been diagnosed with his cancer. It would have been, I don't know if he would have used the word superficial, but it definitely wouldn't have been as deep, because it kind of forced him to go into, deeper into who God is and how God loves through pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so again, that's hard to focus on, I think, at times especially when you're in the middle of it. And so I don't want either one of us, and I don't think we have, but either one of us to sound insensitive to suffering, because we're not. And we were talking before doing this. I was like, I don't have a vast experience of suffering, and so I'm not speaking from this personal experience, but I have known people such as Mike and Angie, his wife, who have had vast experiences with suffering. And these are the kind of things that they say. So I want to. He was just talking about Mike Boyles. I remembered a post that Angie, his wife, put just the other day. She said, Mike and I always said cancer was a blessing. It made us who we were. Now, would I actually give it back if I could? Yes, I would. But the lessons it taught us, I wouldn't. Cancer stole a lot from us, but it gave us a lot too. And so, that's personal experience right there, talking to you about suffering.
It's hard to read anything like that and not get a little bit emotional.
Right. I'm going to take a sip here real quick.
Right. I've been hanging out with Kevin too long. He's making me all teary-eyed over here. And second, not fully acknowledge the fact that, absolutely God can use suffering for good.
Yep.
So I think the third thing that I wanted to mention on suffering was that contrary to what the atheist would say, that suffering disproves the existence of God, we can say as Christians, as a matter of fact, suffering proves the existence of God.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take you through that thing in its entirety, because A, we just don't have time. B, I'd probably bore you all to death. And C, I'm going to give you the title of the books where you can go and read it yourself. You can either go to On Guard by William Lane Craig. He has a whole chapter on suffering and the problem of evil. Or the same book in our first episode that I referenced, Stealing from God by Frank Turek. He has a whole chapter about suffering as well. And both of them kind of go through how, and I'll just kind of give you the summary of the thought process here, is that you can't measure evil without the existence of some sort of objective, perfect good or God. The way they like to put it is, if you have a rusty car and you take the rust out of the car, you have a better car. But if you take the car out of the rust, you have nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Without God, we have no perspective on evil or suffering in order to be able to say,
He's the objective standard of good.
Right.
And if you don't have an objective standard of good, you can't qualify anything as good or bad.
Right.
Like you literally can't say anything is good or anything is bad if there's not a standard of good. And often you're talking about like the moral law. There's an objective moral law of goodness, but it also shows you that you have to have that standard in order to classify anything as good or bad.
Yeah. And I highlighted a quote out of the first book, On Guard, by William Lane Craig, that I really like. And this is, I think, how he summarizes that whole chapter is basically, paradoxically then, even though the problem of suffering is the greatest objection to the existence of God, at the end of the day, God is the only solution to the problem of suffering. If God does not exist, then we are locked without hope in a world filled with pointless and unredeemed suffering. God is the final answer to the problem of suffering, for he redeems us from evil and takes us into the everlasting joy of an immeasurable good, fellowship with himself. Yeah. And that kind of brings in all three of the points that, with God, our suffering can be used for good. Our suffering is ultimately nothing in compared to fellowship with him. Mm-hmm. And then also our suffering is actually used as proof of God's love and God's existence.
Yes. So plenty more that could be said about suffering, but we now are under 1 minute.
Oof. Okay.
So send in more questions. Follow-up questions to that. Other things related to that, there's plenty that we could get more into.
Especially if there's a certain point in particular that you want us to discuss.
Dive a little bit deeper into.
Let us know.
But for now, we're going to move on to, I'll say it again, Dave is a self-professed, proclaimed nerd. I was told by someone after watching our last video that he might not be the only nerd here, but I disagree. So here is our nerdy question with Dave. I don't even know how you're going to be succinct on this, but we'll see.
I'll do what I can.
What would happen, Dave?
Yes.
What would happen if you tried to hit a baseball pitched at 95% of the speed of light?
Okay.
So this baseball has been thrown at 95% of the speed of light, and you're trying to hit it.
Right. Correct.
What would happen?
Correct. So I'll do my best to be succinct because we just... Oh, there's our timer. There's our timer. Okay. So as you all know, I'm sure, the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. We all know that.
Obviously.
Right. To convert that to miles per hour, that'd be 670, 616, 629 miles per hour. So 95% the speed of that, or I think 90 was actually the initial question.
Oh,
but that's okay.
Someone wrote it somewhere down
yeah, that's going to end up being somewhere around 603 million miles per hour. At that speed, air molecules cannot move out of the way of the baseball.
Okay.
So these molecules are going to be struck by this ball going almost the speed of light, and they're going to be just obliterated. The atoms are going to start falling apart. And for those of you who remember how the atomic bomb was made, atoms being split apart is not good.
That's not what we want.
That's not what we want. So... Long story short, by the way, in the first 60 nanoseconds, first 60 nanoseconds,
yes,
the pitcher is going to be completely vaporized. Okay, just gone, turned to ash.
Okay.
And then I think at 75 nanoseconds, it's going to reach home plate.
Okay.
The batter will have never seen it.
No.
Okay.
Right.
But it's going to take another couple nanoseconds before the shockwave hits him and throws him backwards while turning him into dust. So the long story, the brief answer would be basically everyone in the baseball stadium is vaporized and a mile-wide mushroom cloud ensues. Okay. The good news...
There's good news.
There's good news, yes. Okay. For all you sports fans out there, I decided to get a little bit sporty today so that hopefully draw in some more crowd. According to the national, the MLB.
Yes, Major League Baseball.
Major League Baseball.
That's what that stands for. Yes.
Major League Baseball rule number 6.08b.
Okay.
That would technically qualify as a hit by ball, and the batter could take first base.
If he had not been vaporized into dust.
But hey, still, for your team, if your team is the one up to bat, then they get to take first. They get to take their
There
first.
you go. It's good.
So there you go. A little bit of bright side.
I guess you can look at it that way. Okay, our last segment, which is, again, brought to you by Best Choice crunchy peanut butter. It's called Dad Jokes with Kevin. So I need to realize that when I'm back here, you probably can't hear me. When I say things turn this way, you probably can't hear me. Okay, so I have how many? 1, 2, 3, 5 of them. And I will do these quickly, okay? Dave,
yes.
What is Forrest Gump's password?
I don't know, Kevin.
It is 1, Forrest, 1. He laughed. I think that was a genuine laugh, I think. Maybe not.
1. No, I like it because of the... if all you do is read it, yeah. I can't imagine having fun with that one. But hearing it said out loud...
1, Forrest, 1.
1, Forrest, 1.
Okay, Dave, I thought about going on a diet, but I just feel like there's too much on my plate. Okay, 2 goldfish, Dave. We're in a tank. One of them looks at the other one and says, "Do you know how to drive this thing?" Oh, that kind of tank. Okay, what do you call a man with a rubber toe?
I don't know, Kevin.
Roberto! Oh, these are good. These are good tonight. These are. I think I said it last time, but I mean it this time. These are worth the price of admission right here. Okay, did you hear that the Scarecrow won an award?
What for?
Well, he was outstanding in his field. Oh, good stuff. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will do it again, whether you like it or not. Send in your questions. We appreciate them. We would much rather, and we have so far, I feel mostly, been able to answer your questions than just making stuff up on our own. Some of the nerdy ones we make up on our own, but that's good too. But anyway, take care. We will see you next time for episode 4. So,
Quattro.
Adios.